Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Not So Secret Writers Club, the worst kept secret on the internet. We are streaming live to Facebook, to Twitter, and to YouTube. If you're watching live, then you get to see us and share the fun. And if you're watching on the replay or you're listening on the replay, we welcome you there too. And we will also share the audio file to the podcast. So if you listen on the podcast, then welcome to you as well. As you know, me and the lovely Joanna, we like to have a bit of a nose around the old writing community, and we like to interview authors and publishers and anyone involved in the writing industry, find out what they're up to, what got them into that in the first place, and why they love it so much. Bit similar to us because we love it too. So this week we've got the lovely Marta Pacini. Is that how you pronounce your surname, Marta?
Yeah.
Wonderful,
Hello.
wonderful. And Marta is going to tell us all about her life as a writer and publisher, I believe. So what is it you do exactly, Marta?
What is it I don't do? So I started out writing for a hobby. I grew up writing, and then for a few years I kind of stopped, did other things, and then very pandemic style last year got back into writing. I started writing my first book, The Unlawful Killing of Daniel Brown, and I was thinking, who might publish this? So it's a YA. It's very much centered around both a coming of age story and also highlighting police brutality and institutional racism, specifically against Black men in the UK. Believe it or not, I started it the day before the murder of George Floyd. When I went back and looked at the creation date for the file, that's when I started it. And so I started writing this because I thought people don't talk enough about this. I had somebody in the States who had heard of another Black man, a real life case of a Black man being shot dead by police, who I never got to understand which case she was referring to because there have been several. But I think possibly Mark Duggan, because they were so famous because it sparked the riots in 2011. I was thinking about that conversation that we had where she was surprised to hear that there were police carrying firearms in the UK, because the standard idea that people have in the UK as well is that police don't carry firearms, and actually sometimes they do. And for quite a few years it was on the rise as well, the incidents with police carrying firearms and committing murder, essentially killing people when they should have been. So that's what sparked my thinking about this. Suddenly I went from, I'm writing this story because nobody talks about this issue, to, for a few months, everybody seemed to be talking about issues around this. This was obviously spring, summer 2020. It's now the end of 2021, and already the conversation has died down. So it's not like there isn't a place for this kind of story. But that's how it all started. And I started thinking, surely there's going to be a ton of small presses out there who specialize in social justice themed fiction. And I wanted a small press, partly because I thought it's going to be such a slog to even try and get in with the big press. I didn't even know if I could do it. It's a very short book. I write very short, punchy stuff. So it technically classifies as a novella because it's just under 40,000 words. And I knew that there were sort of these ideas that all books are supposed to be doorsteps these days. And I thought, do you know what? Small press sounds like the right fit for me. And I couldn't find many. I have since found a couple that don't explicitly say, oh, we do social justice fiction, but that pretty much that ends up being a lot of what they do. And another one that just hadn't started doing longer fiction then, but it has now. They were just doing poetry, and then they expanded into short story anthologies. And now, I think literally a few months ago, they opened up for novella and novel submissions. So, you know, I could have gone with them, but I didn't know them at the time. But I did know that there was a load of quite explicitly leftist and radical non-fiction publishers, such as Verso, Pluto Press, PM Press, who do some fiction, but it's mainly non-fiction. And so I just thought, I'm just going to start one. Because it was the lockdown. I was really bored. I wasn't earning a lot of money. I was working a remote job where I earned very little. It was boring. It wasn't very stimulating. And I decided to just try my luck. And I signed up for a master's in publishing at the University of Central Lancashire, which I then took from September last year to June this year, and started Disturbance Press sort of in bits and bobs while I was doing the master's. And then since July, it's been pretty much my half-time job, and I do some freelancing of various kinds the other half of the time to sort of finance it. And somehow in all of this, I've managed to not only finish this first book, so that's what it looks like, the thing that started it all.
Yeah.
And it's coming out in February. I'm also writing a second one called Conspiracy, which is hopefully coming out in June, assuming I get all the editing and production done in time. So I guess I'm a writer first, but not exactly foremost at the moment, because in the meantime I've ended up starting a publishing house, and I've been spending a lot of time reading submissions and signing up some authors. So I've got 3 authors signed up now. Stephen Grant, whose book Something Better is coming out in the autumn of next year, 2022. And then I've got Ryan Cogley, whose book An Inquiry into Innocence is coming out at the start of 2023. And then Alan Trower's book, The Flooded Streets, is coming out in the middle of 2023. So it's been an interesting journey of trying to split myself between being a writer and an author, and being a publisher, and then also being my own publisher, which means my own publicist and all the rest that comes with it. It's a lot of different roles.
Yeah. Well, your journey sounds quite similar to mine. I've sort of, gone the writing route, and I've ended up publishing people and helping people to publish. My reason partly was because I found it so hard when I started writing. I got given so much terrible advice and so much costly advice, and nobody gave me proper answers to proper questions, and nobody seemed to want to, there was a lot of what shall we say, sort of fudging around the issues, and there's a lot of people with very low integrity out there. So I kind of wanted to be the person that I needed when I started out. So it sort of sounds kind of a similar journey. One of my authors has just popped on. Hello, Jane. Jane's just joined in. But yeah, it's quite nice to help people to get, because I agree with what you're saying, and Joanna will kind of probably bear me out here. The submission process can be a nightmare. It's really, I found it really demoralizing. And I've been traditionally published twice, and then once I was traditionally published, I realized that all they did was take royalties and didn't do much else. So I thought, after all of that, I've got myself a publisher. I felt like, yay, I've made it. And it was actually only really the start of my journey with very little support. So and it sounds pretentious, but I think the submission process really saps your creativity, because it's such a dry and demoralizing process, wouldn't you say?
Interesting. Well, I've only been on the other side of it, really. I never even tried to submit this book at the end, because once I decided that there was a lack of this specific kind of publisher, and that I was going to be the one to break into this niche that I'd identified. Because honestly, it was a good time for me to be learning to do something new and just give my life a direction. Then I thought, well, I've already got a book that I'm working on, so that can be the first publication. And I am really happy I'm doing it that way, because it means that with the first 2 books that are coming out, I'm road testing it on myself. So if I do really poorly in terms of things like marketing and sales, then it's not impacting anybody else but me, if that makes sense. Because you're right, exactly what you're saying about sometimes you get traditionally published, and depending on the publisher, they might do more or less to actually promote the books once they're out there and all the rest of it.
You're on mute, Joanna. I think Joanna was going to interject there.
I'm just going to finish off while you're on mute and say that that I think it can really vary with publishers and agents and self-publishing. Everybody's experience is different.
Yeah.
Right. I'm
Go
off
on.
mute now. Sorry, it's been a long day.
I know that feeling. Yeah.
I mean, we sort of refer to traditionally published, but there's different types of publishers, isn't it? There's basically the big difference is the one you pay for and the one you don't pay for, as such. So I would say I am completely self-published. I've gone down that route. I invested all my money into an editor and had complete control over the whole journey. But if a traditional publisher came along and said, right, we're going to get your book out to the rest of the world because your marketing's rubbish, then, I'd bite their hand off. So
although
you do lose that element of control.
Yeah, and go on. Sorry.
I know what I was going to say, and you'd still be expected to do your marketing anyway.
This is it in a nutshell. And I've spoken to lots of authors about this, because when I first got traditionally published, I thought, this is it. I'm done. They're going to help so much and they're going to do X, Y, and Z. And I've spoken to some people who are really quite successful. One lady whose book has gone to television. She used to write for EastEnders so she's got a lot of experience, 20 years experience of writing. And I went to a lot of her talks and all of that. And she said herself, even if you write for one of the big five, so you're talking HarperCollins, you're talking Harlequin, all of those, they still won't really help you with your marketing, because unless you are a famous person and you've got a huge following, it's not worth their while, because marketing is so time consuming, it's really costly, and it takes ages. You don't just burst onto the scene and everyone goes, yeah, you're brilliant, we're all going to buy your book. It doesn't happen like that. So for a publishing company to put a lot of effort into your marketing, you've got to be partway along the journey, which means you've either got to be famous or you've got to have a massive following, because it's not worth their while. They couldn't possibly do the marketing of every new book that they take on. And I think that's the real kind of fallacy, that people think, once they get published. I've heard people say, I'm going to go with this publishing company because they're going to do my marketing. I'm like, I bet they don't. I bet they, and actually, if you're paying a lot of money, they're more likely to be a vanity publisher than a traditional publisher, because what they're trying to do is get your royalties up front, because they know that you're not going to sell loads in one go. Do you know what I mean? I think it's a real minefield.
Yeah, the approach that I try to take is to be very honest with my authors. And that means at that point, they're potential authors. In my submission process, I ask for a sample and a synopsis. Then if I think that's viable, I'll ask for the full. Then if I think that's viable, I will ask for a meeting, and I've still not made up my mind. Yeah. And one of the reasons, is not to drag it out and make the author sweat. It's to try and figure out whether it's a good match for both of us. Because it really needs to be that they think it's a good place or the right place for their book, as much as the other way around. Yeah. And when we have those meetings, I always try and be honest. And I'll say, on the one hand, at the moment, it's just me doing this, and I'm only doing it part-time because I've not got any books out yet, so I haven't got any income yet. So it will be a limited amount of time that I can spend, and I might need you to pop somewhere local to you if there's something that would really be best done in person, and I can't make myself available because I'm publishing.
So you are pledging to do their marketing then, really, are you? Which is quite unusual.
Well, yes, and then the other side of the coin is, however, obviously I don't ask for any money because I'm not a vanity publisher and I'm no interest in that. But also because I'm only publishing 3 books a year for the moment, the time that I do have, I'm gonna be able to, really devote to only a few books at one time. So I think giving authors, before they sign on the dotted line, all the information about how it's actually going to work out and what kind of level of commitment is going to be from the both of us is key, because different people will need and want different things,
Can I ask a quick question? How does that make it viable for you as a business then? If you're, are you taking a percentage of royalties? Is that where your income? Sorry to be. I told you I'd be a bit nosy.
Oh no, please.
Is that where you would be sort of getting your income from? Because I know we call them vanity publishers, and they're not. They're people that are actually doing. There's a big chunk of work that does go into publishing. We all know that. If you know, we were all sitting on this stage with books that have gone out there, and it's a time-consuming thing. And I know the one point that we're all agreeing on is the fact that it's the marketing. The world needs to know about the author more so than the actual book. They need to get to know the author. Once they get to know the author, they buy into the product as such. But so, is it your brand is the actual genre of fiction rather than a publishing house that will publish romance and autobiographies and everything else? Is your genre because it's to do with
it's young adult as well, isn't it, Marta?
Yeah.
So in terms of the publishing house, so obviously, like I said, there's me as a writer and there's me as a publisher, right? So in terms of the publishing house, Disturbance Press, the focus is fiction that has a social justice and or environmental justice slant to it. And I accept anything that's for adults, young adults, or middle grade. I would love to publish younger children's books, but those are illustrated and that gets really expensive. So I'm just not financially able to at the moment, but that's definitely like a stretch goal. So that's the remit. My first book that's coming out in February is a YA. My second book that's coming out in June is adult. And all the three other authors that I've signed up so far are all adult books. So in fact, I am looking for more YA and middle grade. I just got my first middle grade submission this week, I think it was. And I've only started reading it, but I'm very happy that I got that because I love YA and middle grade. But that's by the by. But in terms of the sort of profit or income part of it, I operate pretty much a similar way to how a lot of bigger publishers operate, which is, so let's say, so this book costs £8, right? RRP, that's the recommended retail price. Let's say that a retailer, Waterstones, wants a discount. They want massive discounts, so 50%, say, for example. So that's £4. So they buy the book from me as the publisher at £4. And then the contract with, any author's contract will say that you get a percentage of royalties, right? So in my case, for paperbacks, I do 30% of royalties to the author on the net sum that I receive. Because the RRP unfortunately doesn't really mean very much because retailers want such huge discounts. So there will be 30% of £4. I'm not entirely sure what that is. There will be £1 something. Yeah, there you go.
Without my calculator.
There you go. Well done. That goes to the author. I mean, in that case, that's also me. But obviously, if it was a different author, that will go to them. The rest of that £4 minus, what did you say? 130?
120, something like that.
120. So 280 remains with the publisher. Essentially, I've made 280. The publishing house has.
So you're collecting royal. See, there's so many different. Well, see, what I do is like a hybrid publishing. So I basically help people to self-publish under my publishing house logo. So I charge them a flat fee to publish, and then once they're published, I don't take any royalties. So it depends on which way you want to do it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think what's quite commendable about what you're doing is you're offering quite a lot for that service, because in my experience, vanity publishers will charge you an absolute bucket load to publish your book and you won't get anything for it, and you might still have to pay royalties. A traditional publisher probably won't charge you for the publishing but will take royalties, And then if you're self-published or assisted self-published or hybrid published, then you might pay some money to get that done, like Joanna with her editor and all of that, getting it out there. But then once that cost is done, that's a flat cost and that's all done. So there's very many different ways to do it. But in my experience, none of them give you any marketing, or if they do, it's minimal. It's kind of a token gesture at the beginning when your book goes out there, and that's sort of it. And what these publishing companies are trying to do is to get as many books as they can, because they're sort of thinking, well, if the more mud I sling at the wall, the more some of it, it sort of then it builds, doesn't it? Because you've got lots of books under your label. So I think it's commendable what you're doing, by promising and honouring some kind of marketing support, because I don't really know anyone who does that, actually.
And also, if you're building up a following in your community, like I know with you on Twitter and things like that, if you're building up your own following with for your books that you're writing, you're bringing your authors into it. I mean, that's what you've done in your world, haven't you, Karen? You've actually got this month 5 new authors with published books, but you've brought them into your world and you've been promoting them all the time. So you two are very, very similar. I'm sitting back thinking I'm like the odd one out in the middle, but you're both doing the same thing. You're more general, but you've got your niche market that you're aiming for.
Which, and a niche is a good thing to, that's you either go general or you go niche, and you've gone quite niche. But I actually think I do think it's a niche that is going to, be heard and be valid in today's society, isn't it?
I hope so, and I think so. I mean, I've actually seen a growth, I think, in social justice themed books being published, even by big mainstream publishers in the UK. Probably in the year and a half since I first had the idea till now. I mean, things like Ace of Spades have been massive. There's now, I was reading what I am still reading, if I ever find the time to finish it, Melvin Burgess's 3 Bullets. And it's not that I don't finish it because it's not good, it's just because I haven't got the time. But that's the first of a YA trilogy that's actually written by 3 different authors, but set in the same version of the same dystopian version of future Britain, which I think is just an astounding idea. That's what drew me to it. It's like, whoa, it's a 3 author trilogy. I never heard of that.
No,
so I can't wait for the other 2.
Yeah, that's a great take on, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there aren't enough good young author books out there. I think, I was a teacher for a really long time, and that kind of, I don't know what middle grade, what kind of age are you thinking?
Sorry, that's kind of a specific term that some of us use. But middle grade, it kind of shifts. I mean, I would say it's broadly the 9 to 12 kind of thing. Yeah. But I think it's really more about the age of the protagonist, probably. I was reading an article about this today, because children have different reading levels, but so if you think of the Harry Potter series, the first 3 or so books would be very much middle grade. So then Harry in that is 11, 12, 13. And they're shorter books, and they're a little bit easier to read, like maybe less complicated plots. And then once you get into the 4th, and never mind the rest of them, they're very much into the YA market, and obviously cross over to adult, because they've got really complex plots and also quite emotional. The emotional content changes. And all of that. So that's what I mean by middle grade.
Go on, Joanna.
I was going to say, providing you take the sex, drugs and rock and roll out of a story, I think they can be any age, really. I mean, I was horrified to hear that my daughter was reading The Handmaid's Tale. I've not read it, but I've watched the series. So then when she said, I've got that upstairs, I'm reading it, and she wasn't 18 at the time, I was like, no, you're not. No, bring it back. And then I thought, no, she's got to read it at some point. And I think The Book Thief was another one that they read at school. I was horrified when my daughter was reading that. But, it's just because the material's slightly, it's not got like fluffy kittens and things in that I like reading about.
And
I do think... Sorry, carry on.
That age is, that's a coming of age kind of an age, isn't it? And young people are very interested in the world and what's going on and social kind of events and social issues and challenges. So I think it's a much underserved section of readers. There's not, and there's a real demand now for books that are more diverse, more representative of the current world that we live in, and more variety for that kind of age group. So I think it's definitely a gap in the market that needs to be, there are books out there, but I don't think you can have too many, and we certainly haven't got too many at the moment, have we?
I do think it's improving. I do think there are quite a few books for younger readers that have made a bit of splash recently. So I am a bit hopeful in that respect. I had this really sweet moment in the summer. I went to stay with some friends in London when COVID was a little bit less bad for a bit. And anyway, they've got a 10-year-old who mentioned the book A Kind of Spark by Elle McNichol. And I'd been to a virtual event where Elle McNichol was talking about the book. So I knew that she was autistic and the main character in the story is autistic. And that's all I knew about it. So I just said to Natalia, this little girl that I was talking to, "Oh, is that book good?" She goes, "Yes, my favorite book. You can borrow it if you want." I was like, "Oh, thank you." So I borrowed it from her and I read it in the evenings of that weekend before going to sleep, and I managed to finish it just in time to give it back. And it is a fantastic book, and it's all about this girl who's trying to start a campaign to set up a memorial, like a sculpture, in her little village to remember the witches who were tried and killed, who were from that village. And because she's learnt about the witchcraft trials in school, and she's horrified that they were treated like that. And obviously because she's autistic and sometimes people don't understand why she is the way she is and so on, she sympathizes with the fact that with the witches it was the same thing. It was really just people who were just a little bit different from the norm. And for that they got horribly treated and murdered. And so it was a really good story, but it did make me think, gosh, Natalia's only just 10. And this is quite horrid stuff. But then again, I mean, Mufasa dies in The Lion King in a horrid stampede. And I think I was probably about 5 when I first saw that. And by the time I experienced a loss in my own family, which was probably a few years later when I was about 9 and my grandfather died and I was very close to him. It's not like I thought back to Mufasa, but probably in some way, a bit of emotional intelligence and understanding and maturity had started with Mufasa. That now that my own grandfather had gone, it wasn't the very first time that I'd even clocked this kind of thing. So, maybe it's good that Natalia at 10 is reading about what went on with the witches, because at some point she will have to face trials of her own. I mean, she probably already has in 10 years of life, right?
I think my daughter's just when she was doing her English A-level, she actually featured like the Disney films and the contrast with the violence in a Disney film compared to a different, I can't remember what other book she brought into it, but she went a lot into like Ariel. And how parents take their children to the cinema dressed up in their princess dresses, and then they sit down and you've got the Wicked Witch or Ursula or someone like that in the story. So you are right. We just don't look at it like that, do we? We just sort of assume, Disney film. It's nice.
Children are more astute than you. My son, one of his favorite films was The Lion King, and he cried he must have seen it 100 times. It was his favorite film, and every time Mufasa died, he cried every single time. And he would sit there, I don't know why I watch this, I cry every time. He had to give him a little cuddle when Mufasa was going to meet his maker. But you're right, children do have to deal with kind of, and providing it's done in a way that's not too awful or too insensitive or too graphic, then and let's face it, they go to school and they learn about history, and a lot of history I mean, you think about, I loved learning about the Tudors when I was a kid. I was fascinated. King Henry VIII was one of the most brutal people our country's ever known. I mean, he was just hideous, man, wasn't he? He didn't, I don't think he did anything nice in the however long he was the king, but he was very interesting to us children. So we kind of separate that because it happened a long time ago. But a lot of history, I mean, my grandson has been learning, I think it must have been part of Black History Month, and he was fascinated. He was fascinated about apartheid, about racism, and bearing in mind he was 6 at the time. He came home, he told me that Bob Marley was literally the greatest singer in the world, period. That was the end of it. It was taking no argument with that at all.
I can live with that.
Yeah, he got quite excited singing One Love and all of that. But and he was talking about, is it Rosa Parks? I always get her name wrong. And she was something to do with it, wasn't it? There was segregation on the bus, wasn't there? And I think it was, the white people the black people either weren't allowed on the bus or to sit separate from the white people on the bus. And Charlie was like horrified. He was like, Nan, did you know that they used to make the black people not be able to sit? And he was really interested and really engaged, and he got it. He got why it was wrong. He got why it shouldn't happen. He got that it was unfair. He understood it on quite a mature level, considering he was 6 years old. And I think sometimes we don't give them enough credit for what, obviously it's done in a sensitive way. You don't want the poor boy having nightmares and things like that, but we don't always give them credit for what they're able to take on board. And also we don't, that's how empathy starts, isn't it? That's how, understanding starts. That's how tolerance starts. I've dealt with children over the years who sometimes have said things which, probably were quite racist, but that's only because they've heard older people say it. And then when you actually tackle that issue and you say, no, why do you say that? Or really, do you think that a person who has this colour skin is different really from a person who has this colour skin, or all of that, and then they go, oh, actually, no, that's a bit bonkers. Why do we do that? Why do we, I've had children say to me, why do we have racism? Why do, the Catholics and the Protestants hate each other when they both believe in the same God? Why do? And you're like, do you know what? That's a jolly good question, and I don't know the answer because it's bonkers, But I think it's a really important part of their development to be, educated in the way that's appropriate, but also that enables them to grow up with that that understanding and that empathy and that knowledge, because knowledge is power, isn't it? Absolutely. I think
absolutely.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that I can't believe you're a grandmother,
that just twice
doesn't seem possible. Whoa. But you're actually making me think of a sort of, not quite a dilemma, but definitely a question that I asked myself when I was preparing this book for publication, because obviously it's got a gun on the cover, the outline of gun. And that's because the inciting incident, to put it in sort of writer's terms, is that this man is shot dead by police, literally in the prologue. And his son is the main character who's preparing for the inquest and trying to figure out actually why that was, because it's not clear what the police were doing there and why they were talking to him and all of that. So he's trying to uncover this sort of mystery. And when I was writing the book, I didn't even know that it was going to be targeted towards young adults to begin with. I just wrote the book. And then I learned more about publishing and the literature market and realized that with a 15-year-old protagonist, it was probably going to be seen as a young adult, and the way that I ended up writing it sounded like young adult. So that's where it sits, which I'm absolutely happy with. But I made the cover quite early on because I was putting this together, the physical product, as my publishing project for this master's. So the timeline was a bit different from how it would be normally. And I did have one of my lecturers say, retailers won't stock a YA book with a gun on the cover. I've since talked to several bookshop, independent bookshop owners and said, look, would you stock this? Or would you not stock it because it has a gun on the cover? And mostly they've said no, seems fine. So I don't think that opinion was quite correct, but there is definitely, I think, a perception that YA is still seen as within the realm of children's books, and then this idea that there's going to be parents going out there buying books for their children, or well, not children at the point really, but teenagers, and they're not going to want to buy a book that features a gun on the cover.
I think that there's young adults and there's young adult books, isn't there? Because you've got the age brackets. If you were saying, right, this is suitable for an 11-year-old, then I would say I wouldn't buy it when my son was 11 years old. But I read a lot of young adult books, but they're like, I don't realise I'm reading that. I don't realise they're actually young adult books until I realise there's been no sex in it or anything. Young adult, but it's probably about vampires. That's when I fall into that category. But I do think you will have to double check yourself with the marketing, because I made the mistake on Amazon when I went to do my advertising. I put mine in the category of eroticism, and it's not an erotic, like, it's got rude bits in it, but it's not eroticism. And because of that, I had my wings clipped with how it could be marketed and sent out. So I would double check that, because what the independent publishing or booksellers are saying is fine, but it's the likes of Amazon that you really need to sort of make sure you've covered yourself. That it's okay.
Thankfully they've got age brackets. So on this, I've put on the back of the cover 14 plus, because I do think it would be the 14 to 18, and then adults who enjoy coming of age stories and that kind of thing that would be interested in it. So thankfully, I think things are probably getting better in terms of differentiating. That's why the term middle grade is starting to gain traction, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, it's been really nice speaking to you, Martha. It's lovely. It's always nice to hear different opinions and different journeys and different angles. It's been so. And before we go, so what's the future for Disturbance Press? Is I love the title. I love the name of the press. I think it really it's a great name for what your niche is. It kind of that resonates well, I think.
Thanks.
So go on.
It's actually got a literary origin. I couldn't think of a suitable name that hadn't been taken already, and then I was reading a book by Alex Wheatle called East of Acre Lane, and somebody in it gets arrested for disturbance of the peace.
Oh, okay.
And that I had.
It's brilliant.
That was it.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's a great. It really, it evokes that kind of genre, doesn't it, of book? But so what does the future? What now then? So you're going to finish your second novel, I guess. You're going to be writing that.
Yes, just finished the first draft, so it's into edits now, and so get those 2 books out. Road test everything on myself, and in the meantime, getting future books out and ready for publication. Still getting a fairly steady stream of submissions. Not tons, but as many as I can handle, which is good.
Well, it's reading books is a time-consuming business, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, but it is great to be able to read stories, for work. But that, and hoping that at some point things become to some extent self-sustaining. I mean, I'll be applying for grants once it's a bit more established, so that always helps if I was ever able to get one of them. But one thing that I'm definitely going to try and do is, once, fingers crossed, COVID improves and I have a few books out, is travel the country for radical book fairs, of which there are quite a large amount in the UK.
Really?
I hadn't realised. They're all over the place.
Oh, that's
cool. So I'm really hoping to do that, and that would be a way of not doing what you were saying about only marketing a book when it comes out and then forgetting about it. Because hopefully I can be taking the same books to different fairs and continue taking them, along with the newer ones that are coming out.
I like that.
I'm hoping that the niche, I'm hoping to get a little following that's dedicated to the kind of mission and the kind of thing that Disturbance Press is going to publish, who then will sort of subscribe to that and for it to become a community. You know, I don't just want it to be me for much longer. So if it could become a community, it'd be great.
Sorry, I'm notorious for this jumping in.
I
Have
always
you
do
got like your brand, like your t-shirts? Have you got ideas of everything? So your Disturbance Press is going to be the brand.
I haven't got t-shirts yet. That is a good idea for the fairs, I think.
Well, I'm thinking if you're going around touring around the country and you're building up this, it's a bit like Comic-Con and things like that, isn't it? When people start actually building up and going to these different festivals. Then this is it. You know, you're building up. You'll be the founder of
the brands.
I have got earrings. They're tiny, fabulous. But they're little red triangles, which is a logo. I just found them on Etsy. I didn't have to ask anybody to make them. They just made triangles in different colors, so I bought the red ones.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But yes, I'm definitely, from the start, I tried to establish this is the logo, this is the name, this is the color palette. Because I think that's important, and I think that's something that sometimes people more on the left, on the social justice side of things, and not too concerned with profit, although obviously I would like enough of a profit for it to keep going, tend to forget sort of the importance of brand identity. But actually it doesn't make you an evil capitalist if you've got good brand identity.
Well, and that's what creates your community, isn't it? Exactly. And I think because you're so niche, you'll get a nice following of kind of people who will be, it's like Joanna says with the Comic-Con, it's a certain type of person that loves Comic-Con, isn't it? It's a certain type of person, and those people tend to be really into it. It's quite a passion. So those kind of niche communities tend to have quite loyal followers. So I think it's great, and I think it's great that you're thinking outside the box with the alternative book fairs, and because you're an alternative publisher, an alternative route is kind of probably the best way to go, isn't it, with the marketing? Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So. Oh wow! I wish you really well, Marta. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Oh no, it's been lovely. We're by definition we're quite nosy, Joanna and I. We like to find out what's going on. But the one thing I would say, and Joanna will back me up on this, the thing about the writing community is it is a community, and people are very keen to embrace and support. I mean, I'm sure you get the odd sour grape in there, like you do with every industry, but generally, I've found the writing communities really embraces other writers, don't they? And really want people to get on board, and because they're creative, they want to share their creativity. They want to, and there's enough room for everybody. I do what you do, but I don't do young adult, and I don't do kind of alternative sort of social justice stories. So there's enough room for everybody to fit in, and I think writers are really good at recognizing that, and that's why it's quite a supportive industry. Wouldn't you agree, Joanna?
I'd like to add to that with the fact that because we're all sitting here on this platform as authors, and you really appreciate we've all got different minds. So whereas like with my other hat that I wear, there's people out there doing the same sort of thing as me, so it's a competition. I've got competitors out there, whereas there's hundreds and thousands and millions of authors who write romance fiction, but nobody lives in my head. Nobody can write what I come up with, but they can, what my words are. They're my take. I think there, as you say, the community support, the actual willingness of authors to help authors or give advice, give little bits of information away. No one's actually holding on to it and saying, "Oh, I'm not going to let you know that because you might steal my business," because you don't. You just embrace the authors
and actually publishing. Sorry, I told you I did it too. I was just going to say, actually publishing. I think some smaller publishers are quite willing to do that same sharing, but
Yeah.
especially with bigger publishers, they're not. There is a
No,
lot of
it's a very closed
competition.
shop, isn't it? And I think that's
Yeah.
why they've now got competition from the smaller publishers who learn that it's actually quite nice to collaborate.
Oh yeah, it makes everything better.
Oh my
And
lord!
you can only publish so many books, can you?
Well, exactly. And you know, I don't think we're ever going to stop publishing books, are we, in the world?
No.
Yeah,
Can I ask one more question before we wrap it up?
Please.
What's your favourite? What's your most successful social media platform? What's your favourite one that you turn to?
Twitter. I mean, it's got lots of bad sides to it, but I think publishing lives on Twitter, so that's why I turn to Twitter most. I mean, Facebook was my first social media platform, and for a long time I only used that, but it's really clunky these days. I don't like it very much, but I keep using it because I've got lots of Facebook friends because I've been using it for so long. I am on Instagram. My app has just been really weird for weeks, so I've kind of let my Instagram slide. I don't know. Instagram is so curated that I don't know that I've got that much time for it, so I tend to post on it less. And I'd like to tackle TikTok because it's good for YA, but I think there will be a project for when there's more than just me doing this.
That's the thing. Social media is hard, isn't it? It's a lot to do.
Yeah.
And I should imagine quite a lot of your readers sit on Twitter as well.
I would think so, yes. So that's also a consideration, obviously.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Well, thanks as always to the lovely Joanna. Thanks to the lovely Marta. You can find Marta. What's your Twitter handle, Marta?
Marta Pacini 13 is my personal one, and Disturb PR is the publisher one.
Wonderful. So you can find it on there. So thank you. If you've been listening in on Facebook, Twitter or YouTube, thank you for joining us. If you're listening on the replay, ditto, thank you for joining us. Or if you're listening on the podcast, thanks again. It's been lovely talking with Marta. It's been great finding out about a fellow author's journey, and we wish you all the luck in the world. And it seems like you've achieved a lot in this past year, so long may that journey continue. And it seems like you've got a great thing going, so well done. And we wish you well. So
thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So that was the Right Mind Not So Secret Writers Club for the Right Mind podcast this evening. We'll see you all again soon. We wish you a happy, healthy and safe week. And you can find me at Karen Stanley Author, or you can also find Joanna. Where can they find you, my darling?
Anywhere, everywhere.
She's all over the place, Joanna.
Yeah, at Joanna Cates. Oh, I don't know. I'd have to share me links. I'm everywhere.
She's all over the place. She's all over the place.
Just look for the saucy author somewhere along the line.
Yeah. Well, if you come to at Karen Stanley Author, you'll find her on there too. She gets about it, that girl. So it's been lovely sharing this evening with you all. Take care. See you all again soon, and bye for now.